Hi guys, it's me, Dan the Food Nachi, back with this week's podcast on BL. This week I will be talking about my all-time favorite BL thus far, Momentum by Park Jiyeon. Last podcast I had discussed how this was my number one when it comes to my top four, and that if I had taken any longer than I did, then it would have been a really long podcast. So I'm gonna cut it short and then make this one. Momentum is a variety of stories, and despite the numerous of stories, nothing felt too rushed, except maybe like story 3, which I can't remember the name of the story or the characters, to be quite honest with you. I didn't like that story too much, but nothing felt rushed. Each story had about maybe 15 chapters, and Park Jiyeon specifically said that they focused, don't know if it's male or female, that they had focused specifically on the characters' interaction rather than their status. So that was a smart move, I believe, because you didn't have to worry about familial status, you didn't have to worry about job status or any of that. Everything was about the characters and how they interacted with each other, which is something that I thought was great. Each story was really good, except for maybe one or two, because I just really did not like those two, and that had to be like story number 2 and story number 3. I kind of felt like they were just kind of placeholders, and I wasn't really interested in it, and I didn't like it. So, I had put the story down for a while. I put the whole manga down for a while because I was just so turned off from the third story. It was just going so slow and boring. I didn't want to skip anything, excuse me. And I'd have to say, in story 2, Ito's story, or Edo, I don't know how it's pronounced because I think it's German. He was great. I love his character development. I hate what happened to him though, but we'll get into that later. The first story has to do with the characters Louis and Eric, or if you say Luis or Eric, don't know. I typically say Louis, and that story was amazing. It's basically about this man, Eric, an actor, who gets to work in a film with his idol, and it's a love story. It's a love movie. It's a romance movie, and they are, the main characters of it. So for them to get used to their roles in the movie, they spent quite a bit of time together off set, and the feelings for them felt really real, which was a lot. And Lois felt very weird about it, and yeah, he didn't want to get feelings confused with a role, and they just had to work that out with themselves. So yeah, what I really liked about it is that this story reminded me of Call Me By Your Name. Like, this story is what summertime love should be. The only difference was that they had a happy ending. They had a very happy ending. They did have their little issue, but they had solved that really simply, and they loved each other, and that's pretty much all that had mattered. And I just have to say that Louis is that bitch, Louis, he is that bitch. No one can take that from him. So, big snap. I'd have to say it was a good story to start off with because it's adorable and it's just sweet and happy, and it really brings out the beauty of this creator's art style. I just really like that story, and I'm glad that they start off with this story because that's what really kept me going. Like, I'm just like, oh, if all the stories are this good, then I want to continue. Honestly, though, I didn't know it was a variation of stories. I thought it was just going to be about Lewis and Eric the entire time. It was like 80 chapters about Lewis and Eric. Okay, cool. Then you find out it's like multiple stories. But I had no problem with that. The second story is Ito's story. And I have to say that my only problem with the story was that they did him dirty. He was done real dirty. And I can't remember the name of the characters too much. It was just that Ito played a role in everybody's story, like everyone. So, because he was a photographer, so he was there for actors, and he was there for the race car drivers too. He was a photographer. But I think they did him dirty because he was basically used to fix old wounds, like to heal old wounds, and he didn't deserve that, considering that he was just this kid who was in school for photography. And I honestly was not okay with it. The story itself was kind of slow. It did make me feel bad. This was like kind of the first story that hurt my feelings, to be quite honest with you. But other than that, it was fine. He did grow up to be a fantastic photographer, rather well known actually, and he did his thing. He became quite a player, unfortunately, but he was doing his thing. He was making his shmoney. That's all that matters. But that was Ito's story. That was the second story. And the third story, I don't remember the character's name. I just remember it was about the director who had directed the film that Eric and Lewis was in, and then one of his crew members. And the basis of that story was just how I put it. The director was an older guy, and his crew member was kind of young. So they had very different views when it came to relationships, especially with their sexuality. So the director was just like, if I want sex, sex is good. I do it whenever I fucking want it. Ooh, I cursed. If they want sex, then I'll do sex because that's what I want. But with his crew member, he was kind of prude about it. He thought that you should only have sex with somebody that you love, and they kind of clashed ways. But that story was just, it was not doing well for me. And in the middle of it, I had to put it down. I put the whole comic book down because I just was not feeling it. And I was like, ugh, I still have I don't know what. There's still 80 chapters out there, so what am I continuing to read this for if any of the stories keep going like this? It went from Eric and Louise, who's really good, and then Ito's story. It's kind of getting me bored, and then you get to the third story, you're just like, okay, I can't take this anymore. Unfortunately, still favorite manga, still my favorite manga. Just that story itself was not for me. It didn't feel genuine at all. The feelings between the director and his crew member didn't feel genuine at all. And for those of you who disagree, let me know how you felt about it, and maybe my viewpoints will change, and I'll go back and read that story with a different point of view. But yeah, that story just didn't do it for me. It wasn't until I had seen an edit, a video edit on Instagram from this manga, that made me pick it back up. And yeah, that was about it. We're gonna get to the fourth story called The Therapist. Yes, I remember. After the fourth story, that's when I start remembering the names of the stories, because these last four stories are what stuck with me. This is what stuck with me. So the fourth story is called The Therapist, and it's about Misha. Oh my god, I love Misha. And Gain, I'm gonna call him Gain because it's spelled Gian, so Gain. But if I am pronouncing it wrong, please let me know. So Misha is my favorite character within this entire comic. Like, he is so great and I love him, but I'll get into why later. This is where the BDSM starts to really come to play, and like I said, this creator's artwork does a lot for the sex scenes, because like I said, everything isn't so exaggerated and just out there. It's simple, it's clean, it's beautiful, and that's what I love about it. Also, Misha's like a great dom. Like, he'd be the perfect dom for me. And the way that he dresses so nice. Eep. Even though the story was in Gain's point of view, I was more sympathetic for Misha more than anything. Even though that story was in Gain's point of view, I was really sympathetic for Misha. Because, spoiler alert, but I'm pretty sure there's like mini spoilers in here. It didn't exactly work out too well for them, because their relationship was supposed to be strictly dom and sub, nothing romantic. So when Gain started to realize Misha was catching feelings and that he was also catching feelings, he didn't want to deal with that relationship at that point. He didn't want to deal with that relationship in that point of time, because he had just gotten out of divorce, and the reason that he was doing this was because it made him feel a little less empty. You know, he felt that like this type of relationship where you're trusting each other to do these things was the kind of relationship that he wanted, because there was no uncertainty, there was nothing to be feared. So he felt like if romance was brought into the equation, it would ruin everything that he had. So, you know, he didn't want to pursue that at that time. He didn't want to pursue that relationship with Misha, and it kind of left Misha a little heartbroken. And this story kind of made me feel like, oh, Misha wanted to be happy, which is unfortunate. Then you go into the next story, which is called The Trainer, or Training. I know it has something to do with like training in there. I know it has something to do with training in the title. But this story is about Diego, who goes by Dio, and Kala, which is this sub, very, very rowdy, bratty sub, may I add. He's very bratty, and he just needed a dom, basically. He had first met Misha, but didn't like Misha as a dom, so Misha had introduced Carlo to Diego, and they kind of hit it off immediately, and not in the way that you think they would. Like, oh, this is great. Like, their chemistry as dom and sub was really good, but there was some bumps in the road, because they had also started gaining feelings for each other. And Carlo is this famous race car driver, and who has like an anxiety disorder, who don't want to let people in, and he's just really sporadic, and he just needed someone to tame him. That's all he needed, really, and Diego was there for that, and he really loves Carlo. Yeah, Carlo was also that bitch. I love Carlo so much. He is most definitely that bitch. Their character interaction is really, 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 really cute. It's just absolutely adorable. And I absolutely love it, because Carlo and Diego, with both of them being as sporadic as they are, you know, since you never know what you're going to get with the other, they had to talk to each other, and they did. And I don't mean like it's something like, oh yeah, sit down type talk. It's just like, no, we're going to deal with this issue. I'm tired of, you know, running around. I'm tired of guessing. We're going to deal with this issue. And it ended up well for the both of them, really. They just really deserved each other. And the love is just really, really pure, even though their sex isn't. This story had me in tears. The Banker. This story is Misha's origin story. And if the therapist, if the initial thought for the therapist was Misha wanted to be happy, then the initial thought for the banker was Misha deserved to be happy. Like, Jesus, oh my God. Now, what I have to say about the banker is that people who read this story typically do not ship Misha with Ilya, which is basically the relationship for this story. A lot of people don't ship them, but I do. And no, I do not condone pedophilia or abusive relationships. And I'm not saying that this relationship was necessarily abusive, but some people might see it on the line as pedophilia because Misha's 19 in this story, or he starts off as 19, and granted we don't know how old Ilya is, but he's a lot older than 19. How about that? I don't condone pedophilia. I don't like this story because they're cute. I like this ship because Misha learned something from it. He learned something from it. He gains something from it and he loses something from it. And that is why I like this relationship. I also don't see it as abusive because everything was consensual. Ilya never did anything Misha didn't like, and never forced Misha to do anything, and never put anything over Misha's head. Ilya, let me go into, before I even get into all that, this story was basically Misha was abused at home and at work. Ilya was this rich old man who used to come to the diner in which Misha worked at every day. One day, Ilya decides to take Misha away from that workplace, and he takes him home, feeds him, clothes him. They basically have sex, takes him home. Misha is being abused at home, and Ilya told him if he ever needed anything to call him, let him know. And yeah, Misha left home that same night because he realized he could have it better. There's people out there who aren't just beating him all the time and calling him useless. There is somebody out there who sees him as the person that he is, and that's where their relationship had started. Now, Ilya did love Misha for his youth. That is one thing that I can say that was kind of bad, but he didn't abuse Misha. Misha had every chance to leave. Ilya never made him stay. Ilya took good care of Misha and never held it above his head. Never held that against him. But since Misha was an abuse victim, he still felt that his life was owned by Ilya. And I might be saying his name wrong, but he still felt like since he had that victim mentality, he did feel like his life was owned by Ilya, and Ilya tried to stress that enough that it was not, that he did this because he loved him and he wants to see him do better, and he wants to see him grow as a nice young man. So, but that didn't stop the fact that Ilya did love him for his youth. He did love Misha for his youth. But you know, and everything was consensual. Every little thing was consensual between the two. Went over that. Misha did have dependent tendencies. And Ilya's way of loving him. Yeah, let me get into that. Misha did have very dependent tendencies, but Ilya's way of loving Misha didn't help that. My problem with Ilya was that he wanted to help Misha grow up into a fine young man, but at the same time, he wanted him to be that dependent, youthful boy that he had met back in the diner. And personally, I think that was wrong. I really do. Not, like I said, not condoning pedophilia at all. But you know, I don't think he was abusive too much. Boy, wasn't foreshadowing a bitch in this story. Foreshadowing was fucked up because you find out in the middle of the story that Ilya has a heart disease and he shouldn't be doing too much moving. So the entire story, you're sitting there waiting. When is Ilya gonna die? You're sitting there waiting the entire time. Like, when is he gonna die? You have no clue. And you just, each chapter, you're just waiting like, oh, is he gonna die in this chapter? Oh, is he gonna die in this chapter? Oh, is he gonna die in this chapter? And then you get to a specific chapter and you realize this is the chapter that he dies. This is the chapter that he fucking dies. I don't want to get into like how you know, but you just know. You just fucking know, like, this is the final chapter. Or I guess I can get into it and then like, yeah, I'm gonna get into it because I need to talk about it. In this goddamn chapter, Misha is a gardener now. He's doing his own thing. He's gardening and he plants these flowers that haven't bloomed yet. So Ilya asks him, oh, what flowers are those? And Misha's just like, you're just gonna have to see once they bloom. And you're like, he's not gonna ever figure out what they are because he's not gonna live to see them bloom. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then Ilya gets into his car and is like, I'll be home early today. It's like, you're not coming home at all, are you? You're gonna die while you're out. And yeah, you try and prepare yourself for that, but it doesn't fucking work. It doesn't fucking work at all. And I hadn't remembered, since Ilya's family didn't love him too much, or like they practically used him for his money, he lived on his own, and all of his money, he was gonna put all of his money into Misha. Everything Misha wanted to do was gonna be paid for with Ilya's money. And yeah, that basically, so when he died, every penny that he owned went to Misha. And you remember that on Misha's 20th or 21st birthday, Ilya had given him this bottle of perfume. And this bottle of perfume had a key on it. Nothing was said about why it has a key on it. It's just a nice blue bottle of perfume. So when the lawyer comes over to the mansion to talk about Ilya's will, she says that he had owned a bank and he had left the key to the safes with Misha. Misha lets the lawyer know that he knew nothing of a key, like not a thing. And she told him, well, maybe he had left it somewhere safe. And then you remember the perfume bottle and the key that was on the bottle. And you may have been gross sobbing already, but now you're choking on your own tears. You're choking on your tears now because you cannot handle. Jesus, you cannot handle what just happened. You have to put your phone down or close your laptop, wherever you're reading this. You have to put it down and take some time to process everything that had happened, because it's late at night. You have water bottles all on the side of your bed. You probably should be sleeping because you have either school or work the next morning. And yeah, you're choking on your own tears because of a perfume bottle. You're choking on your own goddamn tears. And it makes you realize how close people are to you. You start to introspect every little thing. I remember reading this and I had to text my significant other and let them know that how much I loved them and how much they meant to me, and that this story really fucked you over, man. But yeah. But as I was saying, therapist, initial thought, Misha Misha wanted to be happy. Like, you kind of felt like, you was like, oh dang, Misha wanted to be happy. The banker, Misha deserved to be happy, because that boy did nothing wrong ever. Literal definition of a baby. Literal. But that was story 6, The Banker. One of my favorite stories on this manga. It was really, really good. There's so much I can get back in, like, go into it, but I wrote notes for a reason, so we're gonna keep it structured how I wrote it. The next story is called Phantom. This is the last main story. If you were sad after reading The Banker, you were sad after reading Phantom. You were like, at this point, you're just like, fuck this. Fuck this story. But you continue reading because it's good. This is where the race car world was really prominent. Because you had this famous race car driver, Oscar. I don't remember his last name, but his name was Oscar. And one of the men on his team named Esteban, but he was called Lily a lot. Or maybe I'm saying that wrong. I don't speak Portuguese because Esteban is Brazilian. So maybe I'm saying maybe I'm saying his last name wrong, but I've been saying Lily this entire time. But you have Oscar and Esteban, and Oscar is his idol, basically, and to be driving on the same team as your idol meant a lot. And they had basically became sex partners after a date or two. They basically became sex partners, nothing more, nothing less. But you obviously see that the feelings were there. The feelings were obviously there. But for Oscar, since he had an older relationship with this car engineer named Eduardo, it was difficult for him to date a rookie. It was really difficult because at one point Oscar was a rookie and Eduardo was a rookie in his profession, and they had loved each other because they were both driving for the same team or same company. I guess that's what you said. They were driving and engineering for the same company. And Eduardo didn't want Oscar to forfeit his career for the sake of love. Eduardo thought that if Oscar loved him so much, he'd give up his career for Eduardo, and Eduardo did not want that at all. So he kind of broke it off with Oscar and basically kicked him off of that team because he knew he'd do better somewhere else, which did a lot of problems. A number amount of years later, Eduardo comes back and it's basically just asking, he wants Oscar back on his team, and he wants to take him back. And so now Oscar is fighting himself between Eduardo and Esteban. And Esteban came to fight to win, practically. And since the tables have turned, and now Oscar is in the same position as Eduardo, way back when, he doesn't want to be with Esteban because he feels that Esteban could, it is Esteban. But he felt like Esteban could really get somewhere in his career and that he'd throw it all away for the sake of love, and Oscar didn't want that. Oscar did not want that at all, which is understandable. It's very, very understandable. But my thing is, he didn't have to go out and do what he did. There's a lot of going back and forth between Esteban and Eduardo for Oscar. And if I'm not mistaken, Oscar had chosen Esteban. It's really funny. If you've ever heard the song Slow Dancing in the Dark by Joji, this story, that song fits this story. And I had played that song on repeat the entirety of listening to this story, and boy, did that heighten the emotions that I felt at the end. So now that I've given basically the synopsis of the story, sort of, kind of, let's get into my notes. Oscar is a fucking idiot. He he didn't have to do what he did in the end. So, spoiler alerts, okay? Oscar had basically was going to give up his whole career for Esteban because the team that Esteban had worked for was going to get a replacement driver, and they were going to replace Esteban. And when Oscar had found out, he wasn't down for that. So he's just like, I'm going to retire. And then Esteban finds out what Oscar had done and was upset about it. And they kind of got into a feud. But that isn't why Oscar is an idiot. No, not at all. When Esteban is the first to drive a certain car that wasn't engineered well for wet tracks, Oscar decides to put on Esteban's tracksuit, get into Esteban's car, and finish the race off on a raining field. So the track is wet, and there's not enough traction between the road and the wheels. And you didn't even see this coming. You didn't see it coming at all. And I don't know if it was because I was phased. I was still like kind of messed up from the death of Ilya, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough. Maybe there was something to foreshadow it, but it didn't hit me. So Oscar gets into an accident. He wants to finish off the race, and he didn't have to. I don't see why he had to. He could have came off the track and made it and lived. Oh God, he could have lived. He could have lived. But no, I'm gonna cry just thinking of it. He could have lived, and he could have been with Esteban. He could have been with Esteban. Because it's sad enough that Eduardo was ready to give his life up and ready to be in a relationship with Oscar again, even if it meant Oscar loved Esteban. Eduardo didn't care, but Oscar did, and he chose Esteban. But he didn't have much of a life with Esteban after one night. After that night. I'm gonna cry. Let me stop. And I just have to say, everybody in this story was pretty much naive. Naivety was the theme, if naivety is a word, but that was the theme of the story. Just, you can't escape naivety in some things with some people. You just can't. I went over Eduardo giving up on Oscar. Oh, I was so emotional. Jesus, I'm going off a track with this. I remember that. My biggest thing is just, you didn't have to do what you did, Ozzy. Even though you're a fictional character. If you were a real person and you were able to hear this, or if you were a real person and your spirit can hear me, you didn't have to do that. And I'm just really upset, but I completely understand. Would I have done the same thing? No, but you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that. After that incident that had happened, Eduardo had told, man, this part is the hardest. Eduardo had told Esteban that he should drive the car that he had engineered for Oscar to drive. Oh, he should drive the car that he had engineered for Oscar to drive because he wanted him back on his team. He wanted him to have a contract with his team again. And Eduardo felt that he couldn't trust anybody else to drive the car but Esteban. So yeah. Jesus. That story really fucked you over, man. Really fucked you over. Reading The Banker and then Phantom back to back. And the worst part is, since there's a time jump in the story, these people are practically like over the incident already. But for you, that just happened 5 minutes ago. So you're still boo-hoo crying while people in the story are going on about their daily lives. But yeah, that was the 7 main stories of Momentum by Park Jiyeon and my thoughts on them. And I know they were kind of all over the place, but that's about it. That is really about it. I really like this story for multiple reasons. As you can see, I'm so glad that it is continuing on and it has a side story. I'm pretty sure they might end it at that side story because it seems like they're getting kind of busy, like really busy, because the updates aren't constant anymore. So there's that. I'm pretty sure the people reading or watching this or listening to this, the people who are listening to this are those who have already read this story. So if you ever just want to talk to me about this kind of thing, just let me know. I am so willing to have deep emotional conversations about these. So yeah, I'm sorry this week's video was or this week's podcast was late. I didn't have my laptop charger, so I had nothing to record with, but I promise I'll try and keep the podcast posted every Friday afternoon. But anyhow, I'm Dan the Fundanchi, and it was nice talking to you this week. If you have any questions, let me know. Please comment, subscribe, like, you know what it is. And see you guys next week.